Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some Scottish books that I have added to my TBR recently. So without further ado, grab your beverage of choice and let's get into it. My beverage is just a little cup of tea, wee cup of tea, because we're talking about books set in Scotland or by Scottish authors today. So I thought, what's more Scottish than a wee comforting cup of tea? So here we go. Also, just before we get into it, I want to apologise because at the start of this year I was like, I'm going to be so consistent with my uploading schedule, and I have not been. But I've been really focusing my efforts on growing my book talk account over on TikTok. So if you're on TikTok, please go and say hi to me over there. But with that being said, I'm trying my best. I'm here and I've got some really exciting Scottish books to share with you today. So basically I have the synopsis for all of these books on my laptop right here on Goodreads, and we're going to go through them and we're just going to talk a little bit about them. So these are 5 books that are, I think they're all set in Scotland or by Scottish authors. They're all definitely set in Scotland. Some of them have Scottish authors, some of them don't, but I think all the authors are UK. So yeah, I'm just going to read you the bios and talk a little bit about why I want to read them, and maybe you might want to read them too. So the first one we're going to talk about is The Last Witch of Scotland by Philip Paris. So let's just read the synopsis, shall we? So it says, Scottish Highlands, 1727. In the aftermath of a tragic fire that kills her father, Ayla and her mother Janet move to the remote parish of Loth, northwest of Inverness. Blending in does not come easily to Ayla, as she was badly burned in the fire and left with visible injuries, while her mother struggles to maintain her grip on reality. When a temporary minister is appointed in the area, rather than welcome the two women, he develops a strange curiosity for them that sets them even further apart from the community. It goes a bit further, but I'm actually going to leave it there because I don't really like to look too much into synopsis. Synopsis? I don't know what the plural of that is, because I feel like sometimes they give too much away. But it does say at the bottom, haunting and deeply moving, The Last Witch of Scotland is a story of love, loyalty and sacrifice, inspired by the true story of the last person to be executed for witchcraft in Britain. Perfect for fans of Outlander, The Mercies or The Witches of Bardo, or anyone with an interest in the history of witchcraft, late Renaissance Scotland and Highland history. And genre-wise, it's classed as historical fiction, witch-lit fiction, Scottish fantasy, historical. So yeah, it sounds right up my street. I love historical fiction. I love witch-lit. So for me, the two are crossing paths in The Last Witch of Scotland, and it's set in my home country of Scotland. Scotland has a really, really dark, sinister past when it comes to the witch trials. I feel like a lot of the time it doesn't actually get spoke about that much. I feel like when we think of witch trials, we all think of the Salem witch trials in Massachusetts in America, or even maybe in England, but I might need to fact check this. But I believe that in Scotland we executed the most people under charges of witchcraft in Europe. So yay for us, I guess. We've got a really, really deep history with witches in Scotland. It's really, really dark. There are actually, where I live in Paisley, there is a little, what is it called? There's a witch's well. And then there's also a place where witches were buried. It's just like a stone, in the ground. It's actually in the middle of a road, so it's quite hard to get to. But apparently underneath this kind of stone marker was where some of the witches were buried, right here in my hometown of Paisley. So it literally is Scottish witch history is right on my doorstep. And I think it is a period of history where there was so much hysteria and so much persecution and so much wrongful persecution of mainly women. I think that it's always good to remind ourselves of times like this, as much as they're obviously not pleasant to think about and they're pretty dark. It's good to remember, this happened, this is a part of our history, this is a part of our collective trauma as women that we need to move through and process. And there's a lot of feminine rage that I think is probably in every one of us that roots back to this really, really dark period in history. So really interested to read this book. Sounds like it's going to be right up my street. So let's move on to the next one. This is, oh, there's no picture. Okay, well, this book is called The Whistling and it's by Rebecca Netley. If you can hear it, it's already too late. Alone in the world, Elspeth Swanson takes the position of a nanny to a family on the remote Scottish island of Skelsie. Never heard of that. Not sure if it's real. It probably is real, just because I've not heard of it. Doesn't mean it's not real. Her charge, Mary, hasn't uttered a word since the sudden death of her twin, William, just days after their former nanny disappeared. Not sounding good. No one will speak of what happened to William, just as no one can explain the hypnotic lullabies sung in the empty corridors. Oh, that sounds so creepy. Or the strange dolls that appear in abandoned rooms, or the faint whistling that comes in the night. As winter draws in and passage to the mainland becomes impossible, Elspeth finds herself trapped. But is this house haunted by the ghosts of the past or the secrets of the living? That sounds really intriguing. The genres for this one, it says horror, gothic, historical fiction, mystery, thriller, paranormal, ghosts, supernatural. There's a lot of genres noted here. It says Rebecca grew up in the UK. It doesn't say if she was born in Scotland particularly, but this sounds like a really, really interesting novel. I love the idea of a remote Scottish island. I think that setting a scary story anywhere that's remote is just getting you points straight off the bat, because when you are somewhere that is cut off from the rest of society in a way, you just instantly have that feeling of like isolation, and also anything that happens there just feels like more amped up. I grew up in the suburbs, right? So this idea of living somewhere so remote is really alien to me. Even my fiance grew up in Lochwinnoch, which is a little village, and his dad's home is like kind of just surrounded by like woodlands. I wouldn't call it remote, but even when I go there, I'm like, oh, this is so quiet. And like, what about if you were to like scream? No one's gonna hear you. No one's gonna come running and call the police. Like, I have thoughts like that. It kind of freaks me out, because I know growing up like on my street, if anything was to happen, I can just run across the road to the neighbour. Like, or even if I'm like screaming or whatever, like someone's gonna hear, and they're gonna come round probably to complain because their kid's trying to go to sleep, and they're gonna come round and complain at me for being murdered, because that's very inconsiderate. But yeah, like, I just, that feeling of living somewhere remote is so alien to me. So I think whenever I hear that books or films are set in really remote locations, I'm instantly a bit like on edge, because I'm just like, what if something goes wrong? Who's going to come save me? Let's move on to the next one. So the next one is Bothy Tales, Footsteps in the Scottish Hills, and it is by John D. Burns. So this is a bit different in that I'm sure it's a collection of short stories all about Highland Bothys. If you don't know what a Bothy is, it's basically a little house, I guess, or a house is maybe a bit grand. It's a little like cabin, place to stay if you are out hiking, hill walking. It's a place to come rest your feet. Usually there'll be like maybe little items that you could eat, or maybe like some sort of makeshift beds, or I mean, I'm sure there are nicer ones and there are very rustic ones, but yeah, it's basically a place where travellers can rest for a bit of time when they're out hiking, get a bit of shelter, heat themselves up, whatever. So it says, oh, this is the author shortlisted for the Great Outdoors Book of the Year. Oh, good for you, John D. Burns. So it says, from remote glens deep in the Scottish Highlands, John D. Burns brings a new volume of tales, some dramatic, some moving, some hilarious, from the isolated shelters mountain people call bothies. Travel with Burns to secret places hidden amongst the British mountains and share his passion for the wonderful wildness of our uplands. Meet the vivid cast of characters who play their games there, from climbers with more balls than sense to a young man who doesn't have the slightest idea what he was getting himself in for. Genres, it says non-fiction, Scotland, nature, travel, walking, British literature, adventure, and more. And John D. Burns, it doesn't actually say a lot about the author, but I'm assuming he is Scottish. With a name like Burns, I'm going to assume he's Scottish. So yeah, I just thought this sounded really cute, and I don't really read a lot of like collections of short stories. I would really like to though. I do like a short story, and I think that a collection of short stories set in the Scottish Highlands around Bothies, I just think it would be so interesting. I've always found Bothies really intriguing places. Not gonna lie, I've always found them a little bit creepy. Just because it's such an impermanent place, and you don't really know who's passed by there or who's going to be in them, and I don't know, I just find them really, really intriguing. So yeah, I'm excited to read this one. The next book on the list is The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook. Now, if you watch my previous video, I did a rambling review on The Ghost Woods by C.J. Cook. That was also set in Scotland. And I loved The Ghost Woods, so I'm really excited to read another book by C.J. Cook. So let's see what the synopsis says for this one. Two sisters go missing on a remote Scottish island. 20 years later, one is found, but she's still the same age as when she disappeared. The secrets of witches have reached across the centuries in this chilling gothic thriller from the author of the acclaimed The Nesting. I don't really want to read too much more about that because it goes a bit more in depth, but I feel like we've got the vibe just from that. Genre-wise, it says fantasy, horror, mystery, witches, fiction, gothic, thriller. The Ghost Woods was genre crossing. It had so much going on in there, and I think this one sounds like it's going to be the same. I love that, again, remote Scottish island setting. We love it. I love that it's about sisters. I have two sisters myself, so I always feel like I can kind of relate to characters and stories when they're set around a group of sisters. And this just sounds really, really intriguing. C.J. Cook, if The Ghost Woods is anything to go by, is a master storyteller, particularly when it comes to things witchy and supernatural and gothic and eerie. So I think this is going to be really good. I actually posted about it on my TikTok, and loads of people were commenting saying The Lighthouse Witches was really good. So excited to read that. So it's funny because I assumed when I read The Ghost Woods that C.J. Cook was born in Scotland, just because I just felt like her depiction of Scotland was so like realistic. But she was actually born in Belfast in Northern Ireland, but I think she's lived in Scotland for quite a long time, so that makes sense. And last but not least, the last house on this list is because the book's called The Party House. The last book on this list is called The Party House by Lynn Anderson. It says, The Party House by Lynn Anderson is a deeply atmospheric psychological thriller set in the Scottish Highlands for fans of Lucy Foley, Ruth Ware and Sarah Pearce's The Sanatorium. You all know I love Lucy Foley, so if an author is being compared to her, it's ticking a box for me. So, synopsis, it says, Devastated by a recent pandemic brought in by outsiders, the villagers of Blackrig in the Scottish Highlands are outraged when they find that the nearby estate plans to reopen its luxury party house to tourists. As animosity sparks amongst the locals, part of the property is damaged and, in the ensuing chaos, the body of a young girl is found in the wreck. 17-year-old Ailsa Cummings went missing 5 years ago, never to be seen again until now. Ooh, sounds interesting. Genres, it says thriller, crime, mystery, audiobook. How is audiobook a genre? Scotland, fiction, contemporary. And that Lynn Anderson was born in Greenock, and she has Scottish and Irish parents. Graduate Glasgow and Edinburgh universities. Very, very smart lady, obviously. So yeah, I'm really excited to read this book. That sounds really intriguing to me. I feel like so many of these books have been set in the Highlands. I must just like have a calling to go to the Highlands or something like that. But yeah, again, I like the juxtaposition of the remote Scottish Highlands, the natural beauty, and then this like party house, which is obviously going to be quite modern, luxurious. Like, yeah, I just think that's a really cool juxtaposition to have these two very different communities and groups of people that are going to come together and inevitably clash. I think that's going to be a really, really exciting read. So yeah, those were my 5 Scottish books that I have added to my TBR. Let me know if you've read any of them, what you think, and if you haven't, and if you're interested to read them now, then let me know as well. As I said at the start of the video, please come and join me over on TikTok. If you're on there, I would love to see you over there. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!